Welcome back. On one hand, it was the kind of week President Trump wants you to see. He basked and beamed in the glory of bringing American hostages in North Korea home. The date and place has been set for his historic summit with Kim Jong-un, and he ripped up and backed out of the Iranian nuclear deal, which his base loves. But there's always on the other hand, isn't there? Even the president's own defense secretary says the Iranians were complying with the deal, which means we're the ones now in violation of it. The Iranians shout the U.S. can't be trusted, and that's the message you want to send to North Korea, isn't it? Some of our own allies, like France, are condemning us. And by the way, reports this week, the president's former attorney, Michael Cohen, has been taking hundreds of thousands of dollars from a company associated with a Putin crony. Vice President Pence urges the special counsel to end the probe into Russian interference. And if that's not enough, a White House aide cracks a joke about the dying Senator John McCain, who is battling brain cancer. Joining us for more will be State Representative Wenge Newton, whose district winds all the way from St. Pete to Sarasota. He'll join us in a moment. Traffic. State Senator Greg Steube, whose district doesn't. And Mark Weston, the author of this great book, Prophets and Princes, which touches on the Middle East and Iran and Saudi Arabia, and very, very timely. And but let's start with what's happening with that comment from a White House aide about Senator McCain, who, as we all know, is battling brain cancer. The senator's daughter was on The View this morning, which she hosts, and she responded this way.
Whatever you want to say in this kind of environment, the thing that surprises me most is, I was talking about this with you, Joy, that I don't understand what kind of environment you're working in when that would be acceptable, and then you can come to work the next day and still have a job. And that's all I have to say about it.
And also, right, I want to.
Senator, why does this woman still have a job?
Well, that I can't answer. I don't know, but I would completely agree that her comments were completely inappropriate. John McCain's a hero. Being a service member and somebody that served, I looked up to him throughout my military career, and I think he's somebody.
And that's not to say necessarily that you agree with him on every issue.
No, I don't agree with him on Obamacare. I don't agree with him on not voting for the CIA director. There are a lot of things I don't agree with him on, but that doesn't mean I don't respect him as a warrior and somebody that served our country. And I certainly think that he deserves a lot of respect for not just the service to his country and our country as a military man, but in his elected career.
But as you know, the president himself has criticized John McCain in a lot of different ways, including taking issue about whether or not he's really a hero because he was caught. Does he set a tone in which an aide can make a bad joke like that?
Well, I don't know. I don't think it's ever appropriate, whatever the circumstances was, to say something like that. I don't know what type of tone there is in the White House. I'm not there. But I think it's important that there's a lot of, you heard what Paul Ryan said about his opinion on Senator McCain. I voiced what my opinion is, and obviously a lot of Republicans have a lot of respect for what he's done. And a lot of people on both sides of the aisle have a lot of respect for what he's done.
On the other hand, the White House put out a statement late yesterday, but Sarah Huckabee Sanders was asked about this today at the White House briefing, and this is what she said.
Certainly, there is not a tone set here. We have a respect for all Americans, and that is what we try to put forward in everything we do, both in word and in action.
We're not talking about all Americans, Mark. We're talking about one American who's a United States Senator suffering from brain cancer and who gave up years of his life in a Vietnamese prison camp.
I think Kelly Sadler should go find another job. You could make an argument that young people do foolish things. This was an internal meeting. If you're going to say that she shouldn't lose her job because of a tactless thing she said in an internal meeting, she should at least have held a press conference with a public apology. I don't think a simple phone call to Meghan McCain is enough. She should be out there on TV apologizing. And the fact that President Trump and Sarah Huckabee Sanders have not demanded this of her does set a tone.
Senator, what gets a lot of people, especially a lot of Republicans, basically shaking their heads is this comes in a week where the president brought home those hostages from North Korea, announced the time and place of that summit. This is a week which was, by all accounts, you have Democrats congratulating the president on this, and the problem is, isn't the White House stepping on its own good news?
Well, I mean, that's what the press is focusing on. I mean, it's
because the comment was outrageous.
By some staffer that none of us have ever heard this person's name before, and I think she did do an apology, a written apology, and she made a mistake. I don't condone what she said at all, but I think if the press wanted to focus on all of those things that you just said, I mean,
which the press has, and the media has been nonstop in its coverage of those hostages coming home and the date set for the summit, but then you have this.
Yeah, and I think that it's unfortunate that it happened like this, but I think you need to focus on the things that are positive that the Trump administration have done. Obama never had hostages come back from North Korea. Obama never had a date set to meet with Kim Jong-un. I mean, there was never these things that Trump has done and been able to bring these type of people to the table to have a negotiation and talk about a real strategy moving forward.
Mark, fair enough?
No. It's very wonderful that these 3 prisoners have come home from North Korea, but it's for show. It was a gesture. It's cosmetic. The negotiations with Kim Jong-un have not yet begun, so there's been nothing substantive involved with North Korea yet. On the other hand,
good news.
It's good news, but at the same time, if you're comparing the Obama administration and the Trump administration, Iran gave up 97% of its enriched uranium to foreign countries. Iran destroyed 80% of its centrifuges, and yet this is called a horrible deal. But we bring 3 prisoners home from North Korea, and they want to give them the Nobel Peace Prize.
Guess what? We're talking about the Iran deal next.
I know.
We are just getting warmed up, and we'll have much more in the week in Washington right after we check the first alert weather. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are talking about the week in Washington, and joining us for more are State Representative Wenge Newton, whose district winds all the way from St. Pete to Sarasota, State Senator Greg Steube, whose district doesn't, and Mark Weston, the author of The Runner-Up Presidency. And Wenge, we're going to welcome you to what we affectionately call the trapezoid, and we're really glad that you can make it. And we want to start by talking about the Iranian nuclear deal, which the president ripped up this week, and I'm wondering what your impression of that is.
Well, I mean, if you look at the anything that good came out of it, he was able to, I guess, try to get an image of working nationally or worldwide with different allies that we have around the world. The Iran deal in itself is, you have to be careful because that other allies would not want to do a deal with the U.S. if they don't honor what they signed and agreed upon.
Well, that's an interesting point. And Senator, I mean, what does that say to North Korea, who we're about to talk to about nuclear, getting rid of their nuclear weapons, when the Iranians can rightly say you can't trust America to stick with its
Well, you
deals?
can't trust the Iranians. I mean, the Israeli prime minister was on there giving a presentation last week or the week before about all the lies that the Iranians had had. And I think doing away with the Iran deal was a great step for the president. Israel wholeheartedly supports that measure.
But our own defense secretary, our own CIA director says that Iran was complying with the deal.
Well, I'll tell you this, it's kind of a personal thing for me. When I served in Iraq, a lot of the IEDs that blew up my brothers and sisters in arms came from Iran, were funded in Iran, were made in Iran, and came to Iraq to attack our service members. So I think we need to take a very strong position against Iran. I think Trump is doing that, and I fully support what he's doing in that. And I think with Israel, one of our strongest allies over there, we need to make sure that we support them and do the things that they need to be successful.
But that Iran deal was never meant to deal with the other bad things that Iran does. That could be negotiated or dealt with separately. It was to prevent them from getting a
And we gave them $150 billion that was then used to fund terrorism all over the world.
It was $80 billion.
To Hezbollah, to...
And also the large percentage of that money was interest. It was their own money.
It was mostly Iran's money that we had impounded.
Yes.
So as part of this agreement, we unimpounded the money. It was $80 billion, $20 billion from the Chinese, and it was their money. It was their money all
that they've
along.
used now to fund terrorism.
That may be,
the missiles that were fired from Syria by Iran into Israel were funded by those
One of the
monies.
top Republican objections to the Iranian deal was that it only covered nuclear weapons, didn't cover what was going on in Syria or Iraq.
Right.
But we had many nuclear agreements with the Soviet Union where we weren't telling them what they had to do in Poland or East Germany. This was agreement for nuclear weapons, not for everything. Another objection was that it only, if you wanted to go to a military base, you had to give 24 days of notice. But radioactivity can be detected for centuries. It's not as if you could just move furniture.
On the other hand, Mark, this was a promise that the president made when he was running for office, and it was a promise that was kept, and his supporters could not be happier.
He also made a promise that he built a wall and Mexico would pay for it. I haven't
working
seen that
on it.
wall yet.
He's
so-
still working on it.
Okay.
Here's the craziest thing about tearing up this deal. Another Republican objection is that it lasts 15 years. We still have 12 years to go, and then they're free to build a bomb. It would be nice to eternally ban them from building nuclear weapons, but 12 years is a long time. By scrapping this deal, Iran can now start work on building a bomb and have a bomb next year instead of 12 years from now. So then if they have a bomb, what do? We go to war. Iran is the size of the American South, and it's mountainous. The idea that we can get every nuclear facility is naive, but let's assume we do. Let's assume that we go to war and totally wipe out Iran's nuclear program. They can build it back in 3 or 4 years. So the agreement that's just been scrapped was more effective than a total military victory.
In terms of people's pocketbooks and their wallets, USA just reported today that gas prices can be cutting into the tax cut advantage that Americans have gotten from the tax plan that just was passed in December. Senator, are you concerned about that?
Gas prices go up for all sorts of different reasons, all times of the year, depending on the use. And if it's summertime and more people are traveling, we get gas and oil from all over the country, not just from that.
But Iran's ability to now sell its oil into the market, doesn't it not result in a greater supply, which keeps the cost down?
Yeah, if they did that, yeah. But so does OPEC, and so does some of our abilities here in the United States to produce more
Trump
oil.
and Netanyahu have been saying they want stricter sanctions on Iran. That means somehow getting the Europeans and the Chinese and the Indians to agree not to buy Iranian oil. It's not going to happen. But if they do agree not to buy Iranian oil, you're right. There's less oil on the market, and the price of gasoline goes up quite a bit.
The other big national news this week was someone leaked Michael Cohen's bank records, which is now being investigated by the Justice Department, but Wenge still. It shows that the president's personal attorney in the months after the election, after the president went to the White House, was taking a lot of money from a lot of people, including a company that is backed by a Russian oligarch, a friend of Vladimir Putin's.
All right. Well, that was a problem all through the election, his relationship and what was happening behind the scenes with the Russians. And now that you're finding all of the breadcrumbs, if you will, and looking at money, because money don't lie. People lie, but money don't lie. You can follow the trails of what actually happened, and I think it's going to be worse than we're seeing now.
There's no evidence whatsoever that we have seen that Trump colluded with the Russians. None. And Michael Cohen has other clients. Who knows what he was doing? And I also think it's interesting that the same Justice Department is now leaking documents in their own investigation.
Well, let me ask you this. How do you know there's no evidence of collusion? I mean,
Because there hasn't been any.
Trump says
Senator,
so.
The House has done an investigation. They just closed it.
Hold on one second. House investigation. You're talking about House Republicans.
Correct.
Shutting down an
A
investigation.
bipartisan committee.
There was
It is
nothing.
bipartisan.
The Democrats wrote an alternate report and objected
Hold
to
on
the
one second.
Republicans' findings.
Tom Rooney, who you're hoping to replace in the United States Congress,
Said that the committee should be shut down and the investigation should be shut down.
That the House investigation has no credibility because it simply became a totally partisan affair on both sides. But the question I wanted to ask you, as an attorney, prosecutors don't tell you what evidence they have during the course of an investigation. They tell you when they indict, don't they not?
Well, it depends on what investigation they're doing. I mean, as an attorney, I think the attorney-client privilege is a pretty strong privilege that has completely been blown away in this.
I'm talking about the Mueller investigation and whether or not Mueller has found evidence of collusion.
Has he? I mean, if he has, that hasn't been made
Let's just
public.
look at the evidence that's out there. Michael Flynn has colluded with the Russians. Michael Cohen has colluded with the Russians. Papadopoulos has colluded with. Well, they're dealing. They have financial dealings with the Russians. If they're not, the dealings are not with Britain or Germany or Italy. They're all the dealings seem to be with Russia.
Yeah, but Mark, the Michael Flynn had contacts with the Russians. Michael Cohen had contact with the Russians. So did Donald Trump Jr. But that doesn't mean that there was a quid pro quo in terms of help with the election.
Okay, that we don't know yet, but there's a lot of financial dealings with the Russians. There's a lot of tax returns that we haven't been able to see yet. And we do know that $500,000 of Victor Vekselberg's money went into the exact same account that paid Stormy Daniels $130,000.
With that, Wenge, for the last year or so, the Democrats have had a tremendous lead in the generic ballot. Who voters want to see control Congress in the next session in November. A new poll came out this week showing that the Democratic advantage is down to 4 points. With all this going on, why is that?
Well, I would say you're getting distractions. You know, say you have something about we're making inways on Russia because they're indicting all these people that surround the president, and then you come up with something else that he'll shift the narrative, and then people all over the place. But you know, and what I've seen from the Enough is Enough movement with these young people that came to Tallahassee in the thousands. I mean, they're going to register and they're going to vote. I don't think the polls are reflective of that. What that's going to do. That's going to be huge, and the voters.
Greg, I wanted to give you the last word here.
Well, it's clearly not a blue wave. It's a blue dribble. I mean, you're seeing through, and it's a long time between now and the midterms. You have Trump that's doing things that Obama never did. He's bringing back hostages from North Korea. He's sitting down with the leader of North Korea and trying to have a deal with him. And he's doing the things that he promised he would do.
I think Obama found bin Laden when nobody else could, and
okay.
you know, so he did do some things.
All right, we have to take a quick break, and we'll be back for final thoughts when we return. And our guests join us right now for final thoughts. So picking up on that conversation about where we are at going into the midterms, Mark, you have covered a lot of national politics, and you know, for instance, in 2010 when the Republicans took over Congress, during that campaign, it was the Tea Party movement, the backlash to Obamacare. The Republicans weren't proposing anything. They just basically sat back. Is that the same thing that the Democrats are trying to do right now?
Possibly. There's two prior elections I think you can look at that will tell us a few things. One, in 1932, when it was Roosevelt against Herbert Hoover, and there was 25% unemployment and breadlines, 39% of the country still voted Republican. So you have a very large base that's going to vote Republican no matter what. But I think you're right. The Democrats, being the opposition party now, don't necessarily have to say we're for this and we're for this and this is our plan. In 1946, when the Republicans were opposing Harry Truman, they had a two-word slogan, had enough. And the Democrats could easily do that this fall.
But Wenge, you know, there's an axiom that if your opponent is self-destructing, the best thing to do is just basically stand by and not do anything. You have the Russia investigation that is going to go one way or another. But I keep on asking every Democrat who joins us on the trapezoid, what is the Democrats' message this fall? And I can't really get a real answer.
Well, you really don't need a message. You look at all the missteps and the things that have happened in this administration, and you'll see that it was first repeal Obamacare, it was replace Obamacare, it's now just leave Obamacare alone, and look how many people that would suffer, even in the Republican districts, that if they don't have health care for people that's there. So,
but how does that make the argument that Democrats should lead?
It's not making an argument that they should lead. It's just showing that the leadership is not comfortable in trying to provide health care nationwide for all the people that need it. Here in Florida, we have 800,000 people that don't have health care because the leadership in the Capitol don't want to give it to them.
Democrats could say Trump promised to revive the Rust Belt, and the only thing he's done so far is lower taxes for the rich.
Correct.
But I have not heard that consistent message from any national Democrat or even local Democrat. Senator, let me ask you this. I mean, you may, or the Vice President this week asked the special counsel to end the investigation. But as a lawyer, you know prosecutors end their investigations when they don't listen to outside folks who wish them to do that. Are you concerned that, you know, there could be other indictments and other moves, the issue about whether or not the president testifies before the grand jury, as we get closer to Election Day?
Look, you've got a historic tax cut that was passed by Trump during this
I don't see
administration.
too many Republicans campaigning on that.
Me either.
Okay, well, let's say the average salary for a family of four in the state of Florida is $61,000 a year. Next year, their tax bill is going to go from $1,900 a year down to $94 a year. So how is that not a tax cut to the middle class and the working class?
Oh wait, we have one Republican campaigning on it. So we got to end it there.